7 simple Stoic habits that will transform you in 2026. We don't usually stop long enough to ask this question. We keep moving. We stay busy. We tell ourselves we'll reflect later. But eventually, time forces the question on us. What do we actually have to show for the year that just passed? Not the plans we made, not the intentions we had, not the version of ourselves we imagined we'd become. What did we really do with the time? And if we're honest, not harsh, just honest, most of us have to admit something quietly uncomfortable. We weren't the person we were capable of being, not because we're lazy, not because we didn't care, but because life happened, work piled up, energy faded, old habits slipped back in without asking permission. The same patterns, the same delays, the same compromises we told ourselves were temporary. This isn't failure, it's drift, and drift is what happens when intention isn't anchored. The Stoics understood this better than most. They didn't believe people change because they want to. They believed people change when they're finally willing to look clearly at themselves. Epictetus asked a question that still cuts through excuses today. How much longer are you going to wait before you demand the best of yourself? Not perfection. Not some unrealistic ideal, just the best you are capable of. That question isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to wake you up, because waiting has a cost. And clarity is where change actually begins. That's why Marcus Aurelius did something strange for a man who ruled an empire. He spent time alone with his thoughts, every day, not to escape responsibility, but to prepare himself for it. Whether he was at war, sick, exhausted, or surrounded by power, Marcus returned to the same habit. He wrote, not for history, not for an audience, not even for us. He wrote to confront himself. That's why Meditations doesn't read like philosophy. It reads like someone trying to stay steady in a world that keeps pulling him off center. Writing things down slows the mind. It removes the need to perform. It gives you a place to be honest without consequences. John F. Kennedy did the same thing during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when a single mistake could have ended the world. Instead of reacting outward, he picked up a pen. He worked things out on the page. As Anne Frank once said, paper is more patient than people. When you don't give your thoughts somewhere to go, they come out sideways in impatience, in bad decisions, in unnecessary conflict. But when you write, you create distance. You gain perspective. You regain control. Journaling isn't about productivity, it's about clarity, and clarity is what most people are missing. If you were to adopt only one habit, not for a year, but for life, this would be enough. Because when you start working things out on the page, you stop carrying everything in your head. Your mind feels lighter. Your decisions improve. The people around you feel the difference. Change doesn't start with motivation. It starts with facing yourself calmly, consistently, and without excuses. And that's where everything else begins. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about forcing yourself, about punishment, about grinding through things you hate. The Stoics saw it differently. For them, discipline wasn't something you did, it was something you became. Marcus Aurelius never framed discipline as self-denial. He framed it as self-respect. When he wrote about getting out of bed early, he wasn't giving productivity advice. He was asking a deeper question. What kind of person are you choosing to be today? Every small decision answers that question. Do you hit the snooze button, or do you get up? Do you avoid the difficult conversation, or step into it? Do you delay what matters, or act when it's uncomfortable? These moments look small, but they are identity votes. Marcus writes that at dawn, when you struggle to rise, remind yourself that you were born to act, not to stay warm and comfortable. That line isn't about mornings, it's about purpose. You weren't put here to optimize comfort, you were put here to participate in life. Discipline is how you stop negotiating with yourself. It's how you become someone whose word means something, even to yourself. And that's why waking up early matters, even if you hate it. Not because mornings are magical, but because they are quiet, before messages, before demands, before the world starts pulling at you. When you claim that time, you're telling yourself something important. I move first. That message carries weight. Toni Morrison understood this. For years, she woke before sunrise to write, not because it was easy, but because it protected her identity as a writer. Before she was a mother, before she was interrupted, before the world asked anything of her. Discipline creates boundaries around who you are, but the Stoics didn't believe discipline stopped at routine. They believed in voluntary hardship, not because suffering is noble, but because comfort weakens judgment. Seneca said we treat the body rigorously so it does not become disobedient to the mind. Cold water, physical effort, fatigue. These weren't fitness trends, they were training exercises. When you do hard things on purpose, something shifts internally. You stop seeing difficulty as a threat. You stop panicking when things get uncomfortable. You develop self-trust. You become someone who doesn't fold under pressure. That identity carries everywhere. Into your work, into your relationships, into moments where quitting would be easy and tempting. That's why one hard goal per year matters, not 10, not everything. One thing big enough to stretch you. Because when you commit to something difficult and see it through, you don't just complete the task. You change the story you tell yourself about who you are. You become someone who finishes, someone who endures, someone who doesn't abandon themselves when it gets uncomfortable. That confidence isn't loud. It doesn't need validation. It's quiet, and it's earned. Discipline isn't about controlling your life. It's about becoming someone you trust to live it. There's a strange thing that happens when people slow down, when they walk, when they step away from noise, when they stop filling every quiet moment with distraction. They remember they're alive. The Stoics placed enormous value on walking, not as exercise, but as mental hygiene. Seneca believed the mind needed wandering walks. Nietzsche later said that only thoughts born while walking were worth anything. Walking does something subtle. It loosens mental knots. It lowers emotional pressure. It creates space where insight can surface without force. You don't solve problems while walking. They solve themselves. And in a world that constantly demands your attention, walking is a quiet act of resistance. But Stoicism was never just about inner calm. That's where many people misunderstand it. They think it's about detachment, about emotional distance, about focusing only on yourself. Marcus Aurelius rejected that idea outright. Over and over again, he returns to the same principle. A good life is good character expressed in service to others. You cannot live well alone. A year focused only on self-optimization eventually collapses inward. It becomes anxious, self-absorbed, unstable. But when you ask a different question, how can I be useful? Something shifts. Service pulls you out of your own head. It breaks the loop of rumination. It restores proportion. You don't need to save the world, you need to contribute. A small kindness, a moment of patience, an act of generosity that no one applauds. Doing good grounds you in reality. It gives you something solid to stand on when the world feels chaotic. And then there is the habit that sharpens all others, the one most people avoid. Remembering death, memento mori, not as fear, not as darkness, as clarity. Seneca warned that people act as if death is somewhere far ahead when in reality it is happening constantly. The past year is already gone, dead, unrecoverable. And that's not depressing, it's focusing. When you remember that your time is finite, distractions lose their grip. Petty conflicts shrink, false urgency fades. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Remembering death doesn't make life smaller, it makes it precise. It helps you say no without guilt. It helps you prioritize without apology. It reminds you that time spent elsewhere is time not spent with the people you love. Seneca said we fiercely guard our money, but treat our time as if it's infinite. Life isn't short in the way we think. We just waste much of it. So if this year is going to be different, it won't be because you waited for motivation. It will be because you respected time. You chose discipline over drift, clarity over noise, service over self-absorption. You stopped postponing your life. The year ahead isn't guaranteed, but the way you live today is. Demand the best of yourself, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, consistently, and without excuses. That's how a life is built.